For two reasons I don't think I agree with it. One, I think us getting the district HR person here is getting pretty closely off the edge of our charter and what we're supposed to do with it. You know, that's a district function, and HR has its own role in that. First issue. Second issue is it doesn't really address the problem that we're kind of orbiting around, and maybe back to Tom again, to, you know, should in an appointment like this committee, should not the entire Board of Education see all the nominees' packages, racked and stacked, evaluated, and then either approve, disapprove the nomination? I mean, in my mind, that's what's wrong with this. Obviously, the board was only forwarded one name, right? So you didn't know anything about these other people, whoever they may be.
All we know is that who applied.
And, you know, that's, it seems to me what we should be pushing for is to have the whole board make the selection based on what other screening and recommendations are come up through the process. I am somewhat sensitive to the confidentiality as well, and I got to tell you, Nick, as I did before, I don't really have any problem with that confidentiality form in the interview process. I don't think it needs to be a matter of public record who applies to the CBOC or what their ranking is within the evaluative process or not. That's something the board can see in private, like they do other personnel matters relative to this.
Not personnel
No,
matter.
it's, you know, volunteers shouldn't have to have their debates about them put out in public either. But there should be some confidentiality in their evaluation.
David had a comment, then Bernardo, then Tom.
I guess my comment is we've seen from the YouTube and the meetings everybody's attended that the board can't get through what they've got now, and for them to review the applications is never going to get done, I don't think. I think what's happened, what I see is they've delegated that down to personnel to try to vet through some of the things and to come with a recommendation. I think the problem is what we expect is those recommendations to go to the board, but what from Ms. Lopez is saying is certain board members have delegated that authority to Mr. Brand, and so he's making the decision what goes forward to them. What we would like to see is a recommendation from that committee go to the full board.
That's the
But
issue.
the problem is somewhere along the line, Mr. Brand has been given that authority where he gets to see it first and he gets to vet it first. That's what's wrong with the process. The committee is fine, I think, instead of the board, because they vet through a lot of things. They make recommendations. I've been on the interviews. I was on the interview with Dr. Grubb and one other ones, and the committee vets through everything and says, what's our recommendation? Number one, number two, to fill these positions. We all vote on it, it's unanimous, it goes forward. That's supposed to get to the full board. The problem is it's getting to Dr. Brand, and he's all of a sudden interjecting his own personal decisions right there, and that's what's wrong with the process.
That's it.
And so if I may, Mr. Chair, that was my whole point of demanding complete transparency from the district, is that it's obvious that the district can provide the transparency to do something as simple as fill this committee with qualified candidates. And so I think that if we can be assured that this committee is being filled by qualified candidates and there isn't any interference, then maybe, you know, then I wouldn't be pushing to have some sort of a report to us. But I mean, it's obvious from what we've seen that we had 2 qualified candidates, one of them was vetted out, and it's obvious that the district is not following its own processes to put qualified candidates on this committee. So I agree that if the process was clean, there'd be no need for this discussion whatsoever, but it's clear that it isn't. And again, we can go as far back as Mr. McKierney and Dr. Grubb, and things, quite frankly, have improved a little, but not much.
Tom, then I'm going to make a motion.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So I think my recommendation, Mr. Chair, would be hearing everyone in discussion would be that as an agenda item on your joint meeting with the board coming up on the 13th of May, that one of the agenda items be the selection process, and that you come as a committee with a recommendation to the board for how you think the Bond Oversight Committee position should be filled. And then given that, then the board members can have that discussion with you and then come up to, and then we could bring that back as a bylaw change in the subsequent board meeting in June. So that would be my recommendation. And I think one of the other things that's on the bylaws that's silent that needs to be resolved as well is the renewal of terms. You know, how are terms renewed?
Tom, you had a comment, Dr. Grubb, and I have.
Well, I just want to say a couple things that I'd like to see, and I saw it when there was a public comment over there, Mr. Chair. You know, I think it's important to do exactly what Mr. Callahan said, and it's been echoed by Mr. McInerney. What I'd like to be able to see is a pathway that is printed out clearly as to how the process works. Not only on how those are chosen, and how they're vetted, and who makes the final decision and where it goes, but also how the people who didn't become selected are notified. I think that's important. And a letter that goes out from HR saying, thank you very much for your interest in serving on the bond committee. You were not selected. We appreciate your opportunity to volunteer. I think those are good HR policies that should be followed through in a situation like this. I found out I wasn't selected in the first go-around having a bagel at Einstein's from someone that I'm not going to divulge who it was, but it was the wife of one of our people in the room here. And I said, well, gee, she says, I understand they selected the bond member. And of course, I found out, I guess I didn't get selected, did I? Didn't hear about it. And then I found out when I was selected, about 3 hours before the meeting, and I was to come down for an orientation. Well, that's just not professional. I mean, that gives a poor demonstration of all the good things that are done in the district when we don't follow through with qualified and quality professionalism all the way up and down the line. So I would say a part of all that process is to have solid HR dictates into how it works.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kevin, and,
I've been in this corner for an hour now.
all right.
David, you're done.
Okay, I mean, I first and foremost disagree that that HR has any, they may be the clerk of the works on this thing, but this is not an HR issue and this is not a personnel issue. That is the beginning and the end of that day. We are the people's eyes. The education code and the government code is very specific that the board must appoint us. Now, and I say this because I probably have served on more boards and committees of governmental nature than anyone else in the room. I mean, presently I'm Otay Valley Regional Park. That's a joint powers. It's a little different how you're appointed to that. I chair the working committee on making the entitlement and planning process more intuitive for the city of Chula Vista. And next week I will be part of the board that's going to choose the new planning director, assistant city manager for city of Chula Vista. Now, I will guarantee you that if the recommendation that comes out of this group, it'll be all day and we're going to see however many candidates that we're going to see, we will rate them. That would be private because most of those people have another job, and if it comes out that they're job shopping, there is a problem with that. It doesn't apply to us. But I will guarantee you that the city manager isn't going to have veto power over what our recommendation is to the city council. And if he does, then we are a sham. There is no freaking reason to have a committee choose it. So the beginning and the end of that is if the board sees fit to abrogate or delegate, depending on your point of view, their responsibility in choosing. But in my view, the entire process, because we are the eyes and ears of this community, they should be able to sit in and listen to our interview and then see who is chosen. And we should be proud to have our names chosen, and not all are chosen. There's a limited number. I have been gotten a short stick a number of times, either because of political, who you know, or just who they wanted at the time. And it is nothing shameful because you weren't chosen to serve. It's an honor to have actually even gotten to that point in the cutout. So the problem that we have right now is that there was a person who had veto power, or seemingly exercised veto power, in light of two names put forward for the two vacancies from the panel that was put together to handle this. There is the problem. you solve that problem, you get past it. It was asked and it was refused to answer.
Right.
So there's the problem, and this goes to the heart of why this Board of Trustees can't get a frickin' meeting finished on the same day they started. And this is why you're approving change orders 3, 4, 5 months after, in fact, it's been incurred. And it is a terrible way to manage. So, I agree, the board's gonna have to meet enough to get the job done. And if they can engender a little bit of trust from the community, they wouldn't have every single agenda item pulled on them, and it turns into this insufferable slugfest. We are dysfunctional. I don't care what Arlie says that we're functional. Look at our voting record. It is a dysfunctional operation, and it is an embarrassment to me to watch this stuff again or to live through it. And I know it has to be to you, and you don't have to answer it. But the point is, we had a process. It looks as if someone interjected, interfered, because
Because he can.
if your city manager or your superintendent can change or countermand, then you don't have a transparent interview process. And that's the beginning and the end of the day. And whether or not it's private or that, you know, that's radiator or Fords and Chevys, so.
We're not sure it's the interview process, it's what's done with the interview results after they're done.
That's, well, I mean, that's my point. It's not the process. The process worked up to the point.
I'd like to hear from the 2 members of the public that raised their hand, and I'd like to make a motion. We do have a performance audit to get to, and it's getting a little bit later. But we have Fran Brinkman and then Mr. Clapper, and I want to make a motion, and then we'll move forward. Ms. Brinkman.
In defense of the HR office and Ms. Waso, they can't handle this responsibility without interference. You're expecting a lot from a group of people that are, you know, trying to survive a dictatorship. It's just the way it is. That's how Arlie's husband got on this board long ago. When Mr. Morris didn't like it here, he now became part of the superintendent's new, well, advisory committee, which is still not filled because they need a couple of women. And they're being it's very select how they're being picked. So HR should really not have any, I agree with Kevin. Who knows more about bond oversight stuff than you guys? You're the best committee we've ever had in this district. And Kathy and I know this. We've been here a long time. Anyway, it really needs to come to you guys so that it can be fair, the right questions asked, not what anybody else. HR isn't prepared for this. They're great with teachers, and you know, they even have a certified person that does a certified people, and then it goes to WASO for hiring and recommendation. That's what they do. Putting them in the middle of this bond oversight stuff is a tragedy, because they cannot say no, they cannot be honest, so it needs to be done maybe by you guys.
Mr. Clapper? Thank you, Fran.
Okay. I just want to share a little something that kind of happened to me today and exactly how it went down. And this is why I think the procedure is wrong. And I understand, I can accept when there's a reason that I don't qualify or I don't fit the team or I don't make the team. I've been cut a couple times before in sports, and it's not a big thing, you know. I mean, you just try out again for something else. Anyway, I got a letter today from a Mr. Todd Torgerson. Yeah, and this is the way it reads, and then I'll tell you what happened, okay? It says, RE Citizens Bond Oversight Committee interview of April the 1st, 2013 for the position of business organization. Dear Mr. Clapper, it is very important to me that I convey how impressed the interview panel was with the caliber of your qualifications and your presentation during the interview. It was a very difficult decision to make. It is with much regret that I inform you that you were not selected for the position of business organization community member. Thank you again for serving, or for applying. So I then decided, well, I'm gonna just call this gentleman up just for fun, because I remember he was at the bond oversight interview. I called and he wasn't there, so he was gonna call me back. He didn't call me back, so I finally called him back. And I said, hi, how you doing? He said, I'm fine. And I said, I got a letter today. And he said, yeah, that's a general letter that we sent out. He said, but I must tell you that I saw the interview, and I tallied the votes, and you were clearly the #1 candidate coming out of the interview. He said, I tallied the votes, and you were the #1 candidate recommended. And
Can we omit this from the audio so that he doesn't get fired tomorrow?
No, it's not confidential or anything like that. He told me that this is what he told me. So I said, okay, well, thank you. And then I said, well, I'll tell you that I was at the board meeting last night and I wasn't selected, and I spoke. He said, oh, okay. And I told him, I said, thank you very much for your time and your interview and your returning my call, answering my phone call. I appreciate it. So, what is a volunteer like myself supposed to think at this point? I ask you, I mean, I do a lot of work. My daughter, like I said, I've been involved in this district. I'm a graduate of this district. I'm here because I'm a glutton for punishment or whatever, but I want to see that the children of this school district, entire school district, the educators, the parents, everyone do the best they can and get the most bang for their buck. That's why I applied for this. And then I get this kind of stuff. What's a guy supposed to think? Where do I take this? That's all I have.
Well, I thank you, that's pretty disconcerting. I'd like to make a motion, a little extra, that the committee directed the chair write the superintendent a letter stating that the superintendent, pursuant to his prior direction on, you have the transcript, that the superintendent not be involved in the selection process of bond oversight committee members.